Here's something that reveals a fundamental truth about wealth building. The difference between people who accumulate millions and people who stay broke isn't usually in the big decisions. It's not about whether to buy a house or invest in the market. It's not about which stocks to pick or which funds to choose. It's about the 47 seconds between impulse and action. The wealthy have learned to insert a pause, a cooling-off period, between wanting something and buying it. Everyone else buys instantly, rationalizes later, and wonders why they never get ahead. That pause, that simple 72-hour delay, is worth more than any investment strategy, any tax optimization, any financial planning technique you'll ever learn. Before we go deeper, I need you to understand something. If what I'm about to share makes you uncomfortable, if it challenges behaviors you've rationalized for years, that discomfort is the signal that you need this. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Because this conversation is going to expose the real reason most people never build wealth, and it's not what you think. I'm Larry Fink. I've been in this business since 1976, when I showed up on Wall Street looking ridiculous in a brown suit and turquoise jewelry, but hungry to understand how money really works. Today, I run BlackRock, the world's largest asset management firm, managing over $11 trillion. And in nearly 50 years of watching how wealth gets built and destroyed, I've discovered something that nobody talks about. The sophisticated financial strategies, the portfolio optimization, the tax efficiency, the asset allocation, all the things we obsess over at BlackRock, they matter. But they only matter if you can control the one variable that destroys more wealth than market crashes, bad investments, and poor planning combined: impulse spending. Let me show you what I mean with some math that should fundamentally change how you think about small purchases. Let's say you're 30 years old. You earn $75,000 a year. You're walking through a store, you see something you want. Maybe it's a $200 piece of clothing. Maybe it's a $150 kitchen gadget. Maybe it's a $300 tech accessory. Doesn't matter. You want it, and you have a choice. Choice 1. You buy it immediately. You rationalize. I work hard. I deserve this. It's only $200. I can afford it. You take it to the register. You swipe your card. It's yours. That feels good. For a few days, maybe a few weeks. Choice 2. You pause. You say, I'm going to wait 72 hours. If I still want this after 3 days, I'll come back and buy it. You walk away. You go about your life. Most people choose option 1. That's why most people never build wealth. Let me show you why. That $200 you spent, it's not really $200. It's what that $200 would become over 35 years until you retire. At 10% annual returns, that's $5,500. You didn't spend $200. You spent $5,500 in future wealth, and you got a piece of clothing or a gadget that you probably stopped using or caring about within months. But here's the thing. That $200 purchase, it's not isolated. You make dozens of these decisions every month. A $50 impulse buy here. A $100 impulse buy there. A $300 impulse buy next week. They add up. Let's say you're making $500 per month in impulse purchases. Things you didn't plan to buy. Things you don't really need. Things you bought because you wanted them in the moment and you didn't pause to think about whether you actually needed them or whether they aligned with your financial goals. That's $6,000 per year. Over 35 years at 10% returns, that's not $210,000 in purchases. That's $1.66 million in foregone wealth. $1.66 million. The difference between a comfortable retirement and financial stress. The difference between financial independence and working until you're 70. All because of impulse purchases you made without pausing. Now, here's what happens if you implement a simple rule. Before any non-essential purchase over $50, you wait 72 hours. That's it. That's the whole rule. Wait 3 days. If you still want it after 3 days, buy it. What happens? Research shows that when people implement this rule, about 60% to 70% of impulse purchases never happen. After 72 hours, the desire fades. The rationalization doesn't hold up. You realize you don't actually need it, or you forget about it entirely. So that $500 per month in impulse spending? It drops to $150 to $200 per month. You're still buying some things impulsively. But you're eliminating the majority. You're eliminating the purchases that were pure impulse, pure emotional reaction, pure hedonic seeking with no real value. The $300 to $350 per month you're saving, that's $4,000 to $4,200 per year. Over 35 years at 10% returns, that's $1.1 million to $1.2 million in additional retirement wealth. From one simple behavioral rule. Wait 72 hours before non-essential purchases over $50. That's more than most people will accumulate from decades of working, from employer 401k matches, from Social Security, from any single financial decision they'll make. And it requires no financial sophistication, no market knowledge, no investment expertise, just the ability to pause between wanting something and buying it. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Larry, $50 impulse purchases? Really? You want me to agonize over every small purchase? That sounds miserable. That sounds like deprivation. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't buy things. I'm not saying you can't enjoy your money. I'm saying that most impulse purchases, most things bought without thought, without planning, without alignment to your actual goals and values, those purchases don't actually make you happier. They give you a brief dopamine hit, and then they disappear from your awareness, leaving only a smaller bank account. Research in behavioral economics and happiness is very clear on this. The correlation between spending and happiness is much weaker than people think. Spending on experiences with people you care about, that creates happiness. Spending on things that align with your core values, that creates happiness. Spending on impulse, spending to fill an emotional void, spending because you're bored or stressed or comparing yourself to others, that doesn't create lasting happiness. It creates brief pleasure followed by adaptation and then a return to baseline. So when I say implement the 72-hour rule, I'm not saying deprive yourself. I'm saying eliminate spending that doesn't actually serve you. Eliminate spending that's purely reactive, purely emotional. Keep the spending that actually adds value to your life. Here's what I've observed over decades managing money for wealthy individuals and institutions. The people who accumulate substantial wealth, they don't spend impulsively. Not because they can't afford to. They can afford almost anything. But because they've learned that impulse spending is waste. It's spending that doesn't align with goals. It's spending that reduces future optionality for no corresponding increase in current well-being. They've developed what I call purchase discipline. And it's not about being cheap. It's not about denying yourself. It's about being intentional. It's about making conscious choices about where money goes rather than letting emotional impulses make those choices for you. Let me tell you about someone I know. High earner, $400,000 per year. Should be wealthy, right? But at age 50, they have maybe $800,000 in net worth. Where did the other $10 million in lifetime earnings go? Taxes took some, but mostly, it went to consumption. And when you dig into the consumption, a huge portion of it was impulse purchases. Things bought without thought. Things that seemed reasonable in the moment but that added up to millions over a career. Meanwhile, I know someone earning $80,000 per year who has $1.2 million at age 50. How? They implemented strict purchase discipline. They never buy anything over $50 without waiting at least 3 days. They plan major purchases months in advance. They think about every dollar as either consumption now or investment for the future. And they choose investment far more often than the average person. Same timeline. One person earned 5 times more income. But the modest earner has more wealth because they controlled the impulse to spend. They mastered the 47 seconds between wanting and buying. That's the skill. That's what separates people who build wealth from people who just earn and spend. And it's a skill that's almost never taught. Financial education focuses on investing, on saving, on tax strategies. But it doesn't focus on the behavioral control that makes all of those things possible. You can have the perfect investment portfolio, the optimal tax strategy, the best financial plan, but if you can't control impulse spending, none of it matters. You'll never have money to invest. You'll never build the capital that compounds into wealth. You'll be stuck on a treadmill, earning and spending, never getting ahead. And here's what makes this tragic. The solution is so simple. Wait 72 hours. That's it. Not forever. Not, never buy it. Just wait. Pause. Let the emotional intensity of wanting it fade. Let your rational brain have a chance to evaluate whether this purchase actually serves your goals and values. If after 72 hours you still want it, if it still seems worth the cost, buy it. I'm not saying don't buy things. I'm saying don't buy things impulsively. Don't let the wanting part of your brain make unilateral decisions without input from the thinking part of your brain. At BlackRock, when we make investment decisions, we don't act on impulse. We don't see an opportunity and immediately deploy capital. We have a process. We analyze. We model. We stress test. We debate. We give the decision time to marinate. And only then, after careful deliberation, do we act. Individual spending decisions should work the same way. Not every purchase needs a committee and a formal analysis. But every non-essential purchase above a certain threshold should involve a cooling-off period. Should involve giving your rational brain time to weigh in. Because here's what happens in that 47 seconds between impulse and action if you don't have a system. Your emotional brain takes over. It generates rationalizations. I deserve this. I work hard. It's not that expensive. I'll use it all the time. Everyone has one of these. It's on sale. And those rationalizations, they feel true in the moment. They feel like good reasons. But they're not reasons. They're justifications manufactured by the part of your brain that wants immediate gratification. They're your emotional brain overriding your rational brain. The 72-hour rule breaks that pattern. It inserts space between impulse and action. It gives your rational brain time to catch up, to evaluate, to actually think about whether this purchase serves your long-term interests. And most of the time, the answer is no. Most impulse purchases, when evaluated 72 hours later, don't survive scrutiny. The wanting has faded. The rationalization doesn't hold up. You realize you don't actually need it, or you realize the cost isn't worth the benefit, or you realize you were just emotionally triggered and the trigger has passed. Now, let me talk about the deeper issue here. Why do people spend impulsively in the first place? Why is this such a widespread problem? Part of it is biological. Humans evolved in environments of scarcity. When you found food, you ate it immediately because you didn't know when the next food would come. When you found something useful, you took it immediately because someone else might take it first. We're wired for immediate gratification in ways that made sense in the ancestral environment but that destroy wealth in the modern environment. Part of it is cultural. We live in a consumer society that's engineered to trigger impulse purchases. Marketing, advertising, store layouts, one-click purchasing, limited-time offers, social media influence, all of it is designed to create emotional wanting and to remove friction between wanting and buying. And part of it is psychological. Many people use spending as emotional regulation. They're stressed, so they buy something to feel better. They're bored, so they shop for entertainment. They're comparing themselves to others and feeling inadequate, so they buy things to signal status. Spending becomes a coping mechanism, a way to manage uncomfortable emotions. But here's the problem. Spending as emotional regulation doesn't actually work. The good feeling is temporary. The underlying emotional issue remains. And now you also have less money. So you've created a new problem, financial stress, without solving the original problem, whatever emotional discomfort triggered the spending. The 72-hour rule interrupts this pattern. It forces you to find other ways to deal with emotions. It forces you to separate the emotional trigger from the spending response. And over time, it weakens the association between emotional discomfort and spending. This is behavioral change. This is breaking a habit loop that's been reinforced thousands of times over years or decades. And it's hard. It requires conscious effort. It requires building new neural pathways. It requires being uncomfortable in the moment because you're not getting the immediate gratification you're used to. But it's also the single most valuable behavioral change you can make for your financial life. More valuable than learning about compound interest. More valuable than understanding the stock market. More valuable than knowing about tax optimization. Because if you can't control impulse spending, you can't implement any of those other strategies. You won't have capital to compound. You won't have money to invest. You won't have anything to tax optimize. Impulse control is the foundation. Everything else is built on top of it. I've spent nearly 50 years in finance. I've seen every kind of financial success and failure. And I can tell you with absolute confidence, the people who achieve financial independence aren't the people with the highest incomes or the best investment strategies. They're the people with the best behavioral control. They're the people who can delay gratification. They're the people who can pause between wanting and buying. That's the skill. And it's a skill you can develop. Not overnight, not without effort, but with practice, with systems, with awareness of your own triggers and patterns, you can become someone who doesn't spend impulsively. You can become someone who makes intentional, conscious choices about where money goes. And when you do that, when you master that 47-second pause, everything else in your financial life becomes easier. You have more money to save and invest. You're not constantly stressed about money. You're not wondering where your income went. You're in control. You're building wealth. You're moving toward financial independence. Over the next sections, we're going to talk about how to implement this. How to build systems that make the 72-hour rule automatic. How to identify your personal spending triggers. How to find alternative ways to meet emotional needs without spending. How to rewire your brain's reward system so that delaying purchases feels good rather than feeling like deprivation. Because this isn't about willpower. Willpower fails. This is about systems, about environment design, about understanding your own psychology and working with it rather than against it. Let's talk about how wealth is really built. Not through sophisticated financial strategies, but through the basic behavioral discipline that makes those strategies possible. Let's begin. Let me tell you about the psychology behind impulse spending, because once you understand what's actually happening in your brain, you can design systems to counteract it. When you see something you want, your brain releases dopamine. This is the anticipation chemical. It's not actually about pleasure from having the thing. It's about the anticipation of having it. That rush you feel when you see something you want, that's dopamine. And it's powerful. It's the same neurochemical system that drives addiction. Here's what's critical to understand. Dopamine peaks during anticipation, not during consumption. The moment you buy something, the moment you own it, dopamine drops. That's why the excitement of wanting something is almost always greater than the satisfaction of having it. That's why impulse purchases feel so good right up until you buy them, and then feel underwhelming immediately after. Retailers know this. They've spent billions of dollars researching how to trigger dopamine release and convert it into purchases before the dopamine fades and rational thinking kicks in. Store layouts, lighting, music, scarcity messaging, time-limited offers, one-click purchasing, all of it is engineered to minimize the time between dopamine release and purchase. That's what the 72-hour rule disrupts. It extends the time between wanting and buying. And in that extended period, dopamine fades. The emotional intensity decreases. The rational part of your brain gets to evaluate the purchase. And very often, the rational evaluation is, I don't actually need this. But understanding the neurochemistry isn't enough. You need to understand your personal triggers. What situations, what emotions, what contexts make you most likely to spend impulsively? For some people, it's stress. They have a hard day at work, they're feeling overwhelmed, and they shop to feel better. The act of browsing and buying gives them a sense of control and a temporary mood boost. For others, it's boredom. They're scrolling social media or browsing online stores not because they need anything, but because they're looking for stimulation. And they end up buying things they didn't know existed 10 minutes ago. For others, it's social comparison. They see what friends or influencers have, they feel inadequate or left out, and they buy things to close that perceived gap. For others, it's celebration. Something good happens, and they want to mark the occasion by treating themselves, which often means spending money. And for many people, it's just habit. They've spent impulsively so many times over so many years that it's become automatic. See something, want it, buy it. No conscious thought required. At BlackRock, when we manage risk, we don't rely on people being strong or disciplined in the moment. We build systems. We have rules, processes, checks and balances that make it difficult to act on impulse even if you wanted to. The same principle applies to personal spending. You can't rely on being strong in the moment when you're flooded with dopamine and your rational brain is being overridden. You need systems that make impulse spending difficult and considered spending easy. Let me give you a practical framework for building those systems. System 1. The 72-hour wish list. Instead of buying something immediately, add it to a wish list. Write down what it is, how much it costs, and the date you added it. Set a reminder for 72 hours later. When the reminder goes off, look at the item again. Ask yourself, do I still want this as much as I did 3 days ago? Do I need this? Is this the best use of this money given my financial goals? If the answer to all three is yes, buy it. If the answer to any of them is no, remove it from the list and move on. This simple system has been shown in multiple studies to reduce impulse purchases by 60% to 70%. It works because it introduces friction, it creates a cooling-off period, and it forces conscious evaluation. System 2. The cash envelope method for discretionary spending. Take out a fixed amount of cash each week or month for discretionary purchases. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can't spend more until the next period. This creates a hard budget constraint that credit cards don't provide. With credit cards, spending feels abstract. You're not seeing money leave your wallet. You're just swiping a piece of plastic. But with cash, spending is concrete. You physically see the money decrease. And when you get down to the last $20 or $50, you become much more careful about what you buy. System 3. The one-in one-out rule. Before buying something new, you have to get rid of something you already own in the same category. Want a new pair of shoes? You have to donate or throw away an old pair first. Want a new kitchen gadget? Get rid of one you're not using. This accomplishes two things. It makes you think about whether you actually need the new item, and it prevents accumulation of stuff, which itself creates clutter and stress. System 4. The cost per use calculation. Before buying anything, estimate how many times you'll use it. Divide the cost by the number of uses. That's your cost per use. Now ask yourself, is this cost per use worth it? A $200 jacket you'll wear 100 times is $2 per use. That might be worth it. A $200 gadget you'll use twice is $100 per use. That's probably not worth it. This mental math makes the value proposition clear and often reveals that the purchase doesn't make economic sense. System 5. The opportunity cost comparison. Every time you're about to spend money, ask yourself, what else could I do with this money? If I invest it instead, how much will it become? What experiences or items that I value more could I buy instead? This isn't about denying yourself. It's about making explicit the trade-off. You're not choosing between buying and not buying. You're choosing between this purchase and alternative uses of the money. Make that choice conscious and intentional. Now, let me address something important. These systems work, but they require initial effort and discipline to implement. And many people resist implementing them because they feel like restriction, like deprivation, like someone telling them they can't have what they want. But here's what I've learned watching wealthy individuals and institutions manage money. They don't experience these systems as restrictive. They experience them as liberating. Because systems remove the cognitive burden of constant decision-making. Systems create structure that makes good decisions automatic. When you have a clear rule, wait 72 hours before any discretionary purchase over $50, you don't have to agonize over every purchase. You don't have to use willpower in the moment. You just follow the rule. The decision has already been made. You're just executing the system. And after a while, the system becomes habit. It becomes automatic. You don't even feel the pull to buy immediately because your brain has been rewired to expect the waiting period. The dopamine still happens, but it's no longer coupled with immediate action. This is how you change behavior permanently. Not through willpower, which is finite and fails under stress, but through systems that make good behavior automatic and bad behavior difficult. Let me show you what this looks like in practice with a real example. I know someone who implemented the 72-hour rule rigorously for 1 year. They tracked every time they wanted to buy something over $50, added it to their wish list, waited 72 hours, and then decided. First month, they wanted to make 28 purchases totaling $4,200. After 72 hours, they decided to buy 12 of them, totaling $1,600. They avoided $2,600 in impulse spending that month. By month 6, they wanted to make 18 purchases totaling $2,800. After 72 hours, they bought 6, totaling $900. The number of impulse desires had decreased because their brain was learning that wanting something doesn't mean buying it immediately. By month 12, they wanted to make 12 purchases totaling $1,800. They bought 5, totaling $750. Their brain had fundamentally rewired. They'd developed purchase discipline. The impulse to buy immediately had weakened significantly. Over that year, they avoided about $25,000 in impulse spending. At their age and expected investment returns, that's roughly $700,000 in additional retirement wealth from 1 year of following this simple system. And they reported that they didn't feel deprived. They felt more in control. They felt like they were making conscious choices about their money rather than being controlled by impulses and emotions. That's the paradox of these systems. They feel restrictive at first, but they create freedom. Freedom from the stress of overspending. Freedom from wondering where your money went. Freedom to actually achieve your financial goals because you're not constantly sabotaging yourself with impulse purchases. Now let me talk about the deeper reason why this matters. It's not just about the money saved on any individual purchase. It's about the compounding effect on your entire financial psychology. When you spend impulsively, you're training your brain that immediate gratification is more important than long-term goals. You're reinforcing a pattern of short-term thinking, of emotional decision-making, of prioritizing how you feel right now over what you want to achieve in the future. And that pattern bleeds into every other area of your financial life. If you're spending impulsively, You're probably also eating impulsively, exercising inconsistently, staying up too late, checking social media compulsively. The underlying issue is the same: inability to delay gratification, inability to make decisions based on long-term interest rather than short-term emotion. But when you develop purchase discipline, when you implement the 72-hour rule and stick to it, you're building a general capacity for delayed gratification. You're strengthening the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, impulse control, and rational decision-making. And that strengthened capacity transfers to other domains. You become better at resisting other impulses. You become better at thinking long-term in all areas of your life. You're not just improving your financial behavior. You're improving your overall self-regulation. At BlackRock, we've studied this extensively in the context of institutional investment behavior. The institutions that have strong governance systems, that have processes preventing impulsive decisions, they consistently outperform institutions that make reactive, emotional decisions. The same is true for individuals. People who have systems for controlling impulse spending, who have developed behavioral discipline, they outperform people with higher incomes but no discipline. It's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep and how effectively you deploy what you keep. Let me give you another angle on this. The opportunity cost of impulse spending isn't just the direct cost. It's also the opportunity cost of what that money could have purchased if you'd been more strategic. Let's say you spend $3,000 per year on impulse purchases. Things you didn't plan. Things you wouldn't have bought if you'd waited 72 hours. That's $3,000 that could have funded experiences you actually value. A vacation with family. A weekend trip with friends. Classes or courses that develop your skills. Equipment for a hobby you're passionate about. Impulse purchases crowd out intentional purchases. They consume your discretionary income so that when something you actually value comes along, something that aligns with your goals and priorities, you can't afford it. You've already spent the money on things that gave you a brief dopamine hit and then disappeared from your awareness. This is the hidden cost of impulse spending. Not just the money wasted, but the opportunities missed. The experiences not had. The investments not made. The goals not achieved because the money that could have funded them went to dozens of small purchases you don't even remember making. I've seen this pattern destroy financial security for people at every income level. Doctors earning $400,000 who can't retire because they spent impulsively for 30 years. Tech workers earning $200,000 who have no savings because every increase in income was met with an increase in lifestyle spending, much of it impulsive. Meanwhile, teachers earning $60,000 who retire with $2 million because they implemented strong purchase discipline early in their careers. They eliminated impulse spending. They were intentional about every dollar. They prioritized long-term wealth over short-term gratification. That's the difference. And it compounds over time. Every year you spend impulsively, you're not just losing that year's money. You're losing the compound growth on that money for all future years. The opportunity cost isn't just the immediate spending. It's decades of lost compounding. Now, I want to address the most common objection I hear when I talk about this. People say, but life is short. You can't just save everything for the future. You have to enjoy life now. What if I die before retirement? What if I spend my whole life being disciplined and never get to enjoy my money? This objection sounds reasonable, but it's based on a false dichotomy. It assumes you have to choose between enjoying life now and being financially secure later. That's not the choice. The choice is between spending impulsively on things that don't actually make you happier versus spending intentionally on things that do. The choice is between reactive emotional spending versus conscious value-aligned spending. Research is very clear on this. Impulse purchases provide minimal lasting happiness. They give you a brief pleasure spike, and then you adapt, and then you need the next purchase to get the same spike. It's a hedonic treadmill. You're running constantly but not getting anywhere in terms of actual life satisfaction. What does create lasting happiness? Spending on experiences with people you care about. Spending on things that align with your core values and long-term goals. Spending on developing yourself. Spending on contributing to things larger than yourself. And critically, having financial security, which eliminates a major source of chronic stress. So implementing the 72-hour rule doesn't mean you enjoy life less. It means you enjoy life more, because you're eliminating wasteful spending that doesn't serve you and directing money toward things that actually enhance your well-being. And you're building financial security, which itself is a massive contributor to life satisfaction and happiness. Knowing you're going to be okay financially, knowing you're not living paycheck to paycheck, knowing you're on track to retire comfortably, That creates a baseline of security and calm that makes everything else in life better. Let me tell you about the framework I use when I think about spending. Every dollar falls into one of 4 categories. Category 1. Investment, money that will grow and compound. Retirement accounts, taxable investment accounts, building human capital through education or skill development. This is money working for your future. Category 2. Essential consumption. Housing, food, healthcare, transportation. Things you need to live a functional life. Category 3. Value-aligned spending. Experiences and purchases that genuinely align with your core values and goals. These create lasting satisfaction and meaning. Category 4. Wasteful spending. Impulse purchases, status signaling, emotional regulation through shopping, keeping up with others. This is money that leaves your account and provides minimal lasting benefit. The goal isn't to eliminate all spending. The goal is to maximize categories 1 and 3 while minimizing category 4. Impulse spending is almost entirely category 4. It's waste. It's money leaving your account for minimal return in terms of happiness or goal achievement. When you implement the 72-hour rule, you're not cutting spending across the board. You're specifically targeting category 4, wasteful spending. And when you reduce that, you have more money for categories 1 and 3, for investing in your future and for spending on things you actually value. That's the reframe. You're not depriving yourself. You're eliminating waste so you can redirect money toward what actually matters to you. At BlackRock, this is how we think about capital allocation for our clients. We're not trying to minimize spending. We're trying to eliminate wasteful capital deployment and maximize productive capital deployment. Every dollar should be working efficiently toward goals, not being wasted on low-return uses. Individual finance should work the same way. Every dollar you spend, ask yourself, is this working efficiently toward my goals, or is this waste? If it's waste, cut it. If it's productive, keep it or increase it. The 72-hour rule is a filter that helps you make this distinction. It catches most of the waste before it happens. Let's talk about how to implement this sustainably. Let me give you the complete framework for building permanent behavioral change around spending. Because understanding the problem isn't enough. Knowing about the 72-hour rule isn't enough. You need a system for implementing it sustainably, for making it stick when your brain tries to revert to old patterns. Mental model number 1. You're not fighting against spending. You're building toward something. Most people frame financial discipline negatively. I can't buy this. I shouldn't spend this. I have to deny myself. That framing activates psychological reactants. Your brain rebels against restriction. You feel deprived, and eventually, you break the rule because the deprivation becomes unbearable. Reframe it. You're not denying yourself. You're choosing your future over random impulses. Every time you pause before buying, every time you wait 72 hours and decide not to purchase, you're making an active choice to redirect that money toward goals that actually matter to you. When I work with institutional investors at BlackRock, we never frame good investment decisions as not doing bad investments. We frame them as actively choosing the best use of capital. We're not avoiding waste. We're pursuing optimal allocation. Your spending should work the same way. You're not avoiding purchases. You're actively choosing to allocate money toward maximum lifetime value. That's a positive, empowering frame. It puts you in control. Mental model number 2. Systems beat willpower, always. You cannot rely on being strong in the moment when you're flooded with dopamine and surrounded by triggers engineered to make you spend. Willpower is finite. It depletes. And when you're tired, stressed, or emotionally depleted, willpower fails. Systems don't fail. Systems are automatic. Systems remove the need for in-the-moment decision-making. You don't decide whether to wait 72 hours. You always wait 72 hours. It's not a decision. It's a rule. At BlackRock, we have investment committees, approval processes, risk frameworks. We don't rely on individual discipline. We have systems that make good decisions automatic and bad decisions difficult. You need the same for spending. Mental model number 3. Behavioral change is gradual, not instant. You're not going to implement the 72-hour rule once and suddenly have perfect spending discipline forever. Your brain has been wiring the see something, want it, buy it pattern for years, maybe decades. That neural pathway is deep and strong. Breaking it requires consistent repetition of the new pattern. See something, want it, wait 72 hours, then decide. You need to repeat that sequence hundreds of times before it becomes automatic. Before the new neural pathway is stronger than the old one. Expect resistance. Expect discomfort. Expect your brain to generate rationalizations for why you should buy immediately, why you don't need to wait this time. That's normal. That's your brain trying to revert to the old pattern. Don't judge it, just acknowledge it and follow the system anyway. Mental model number 4. Small wins compound into massive transformation. Every time you wait 72 hours before a purchase, you're winning. Even if you end up buying the item after 72 hours, you've still won because you practiced impulse control. You proved to yourself that you can pause. You weakened the automatic impulse pattern. And when you decide not to buy after waiting, that's a double win. You avoided wasteful spending and you reinforced the new pattern. Your brain learns. Waiting doesn't kill me. The desire fades. I don't actually need most of the things I think I need in the moment. Those small wins accumulate. After a month of implementing the rule, you'll have dozens of wins. After a year, hundreds. And each win makes the next one easier because you're literally rewiring your brain's reward system. Mental model number 5. The gap between impulse and action is where freedom lives. This is the deepest insight. When you can pause between wanting something and acting on that want, you're free. You're not controlled by impulses, by advertising, by social pressure, by emotional triggers. You have space to choose. People who can't pause, who buy immediately when they want something, they're not free. They think they are because they can afford to buy things. But they're controlled by every impulse, every trigger, every marketing message. They're puppets on strings they don't even see. The 72-hour rule creates freedom. It inserts space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you have choice. That's what wealth is really about. Not having lots of money. Having the freedom to choose how you deploy resources based on conscious values rather than reactive impulses. Now let me give you the practical implementation protocol. Step by step. Here's how to make this permanent. Step 1. Start with a spending audit. For the next 30 days, track every purchase. Not to judge, not to restrict, just to observe. When did you buy? What did you buy? What were you feeling when you bought? What triggered the purchase? This creates awareness. Most people have no idea how much they spend impulsively or what their personal triggers are. The audit makes it visible. And awareness is the first step to change. Step 2. Identify your personal threshold. The 72-hour rule should apply to discretionary purchases above a certain amount. For some people, that's $50. For others, it might be $100 or $200. The threshold should be high enough that it catches meaningful purchases but not so low that you're applying it to every coffee or lunch. Pick your threshold based on your income and spending patterns. And commit to it. Every discretionary purchase above that threshold gets the 72-hour treatment. No exceptions. Step 3. Create your wish list system. This can be a physical notebook, a note in your phone, a spreadsheet, whatever works for you. But it needs to be easy to access in the moment when you want to buy something. When you see something you want to buy, immediately add it to the wish list. Include the item, the cost, the date, and critically, why you want it. What need or desire is this supposed to fulfill? Writing that down helps you evaluate it later. Set a reminder for 72 hours. When the reminder goes off, review the item. Ask yourself 3 questions. Do I still want this? Do I need this? Is this the best use of this money given my goals? If yes to all 3, buy it. If no to any of them, delete it and move on. Step 4. Plan your emotional regulation alternatives. Most impulse spending is driven by emotions. You're stressed, bored, comparing yourself to others, celebrating, or just filling time. If you cut off impulse spending without addressing the underlying emotional need, you'll feel deprived and you'll eventually relapse. So before you implement the 72-hour rule, identify what you'll do instead when those emotions arise. Stressed? Go for a walk, call a friend, exercise. Bored? Read, pursue a hobby, learn something. Comparing yourself? Get off social media, practice gratitude. Celebrating? Plan an experience, not a purchase. Have these alternatives ready. When the impulse to spend arises, redirect to the alternative. You're not suppressing the emotion. You're meeting the need in a healthier way. Step 5. Track your wins. Keep a log of every time you wait 72 hours and then decide not to buy. Write down what it was, how much it cost, and how much that amount will become at retirement if invested instead. This makes the abstract concrete. You're not just not buying stuff. You're actively building wealth. That $200 item you didn't buy is $5,500 in future wealth. That's real. That's meaningful. That's worth celebrating. Review this log monthly. Add up the total amount you've avoided spending. Calculate the future value. Celebrate the progress. This positive reinforcement strengthens the new behavior pattern. Step 6. Gradually expand the rule. Start with just the 72-hour rule on purchases above your threshold. Once that's solid, once it's becoming automatic, expand it. Maybe you add a cash envelope system for daily discretionary spending. Maybe you implement the one-in one-out rule for new possessions. Maybe you start doing quarterly spending audits. But don't try to implement everything at once. That's overwhelming and leads to failure. Build one habit solidly, then add the next. Gradual, sustainable change beats ambitious, unsustainable change every time. Now, let me address the inevitable challenge. At some point, you're going to break the rule. You're going to buy something impulsively without waiting. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you're with friends and don't want to seem weird. Maybe you just forget in the moment. This will happen. It's normal. It's part of the process. The question is, what do you do next? Most people do one of two things, both destructive. Either they beat themselves up, feel like they failed, and give up on the whole system. Or they rationalize, convince themselves it's fine, and the system gradually erodes until they're back to full impulse spending. Do neither. Instead, acknowledge it without judgment. I bought impulsively. That happened. Now I'm going to follow the system on the next purchase. No drama. No self-criticism. No rationalizing. Just acknowledgement and return to the system. This is how institutional investors handle mistakes. We don't panic. We don't rationalize. We acknowledge what happened. We analyze why it happened so we can prevent it next time, and we move forward following our process. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about consistently returning to the system even after you deviate. Let me tell you about someone who did this right. They implemented the 72-hour rule. First month, they broke it 3 times. Second month, twice. Third month, once. Fourth month, 0. By month 6, the rule was so automatic they rarely even felt the impulse to buy immediately. Over 3 years, they avoided roughly $75,000 in impulse spending. At their age and investment returns, that's approximately $2 million in additional retirement wealth, from one simple behavioral rule consistently applied. But more importantly, they reported fundamental changes in how they related to money and consumption. They stopped seeing shopping as entertainment. They stopped using spending as emotional regulation. They became intentional about every financial decision. The 72-hour rule for spending generalized to other areas of life. They became more deliberate, more thoughtful, more in control. That's the real benefit. Not just the money saved, though that's substantial. But the transformation of your relationship with impulse, with gratification, with conscious choice versus reactive behavior. At BlackRock, I've spent nearly 50 years studying how wealth gets built and preserved. And here's what I know with absolute certainty. Investment returns matter, but they're not the limiting factor for most people. Most people never build wealth not because they picked the wrong stocks or used the wrong funds, but because they never accumulated capital to invest in the first place. And the reason they never accumulated capital is impulse spending. They earned plenty, but they spent it on things they didn't need, didn't really want, and mostly don't even remember buying. Thousands of small purchases, each one rationalized in the moment, each one seeming insignificant, but collectively destroying any possibility of building wealth. The 72-hour rule addresses the root cause. Not the investment strategy, not the asset allocation, but the behavioral discipline that makes investment possible. Without this foundation, nothing else matters. With this foundation, everything else becomes easier. I want to give you one final reframe. The wealthy aren't wealthy because they're smarter about investing. They're wealthy because they have better impulse control. They can see something they want and not buy it immediately. They can delay gratification. They can tolerate the discomfort of wanting without needing to act on the wanting. That's the skill. And it's a skill you can develop. Not through willpower, which is unreliable, but through systems, through the 72-hour rule, through awareness of your triggers, through alternative emotional regulation strategies, through tracking your wins and celebrating your progress. You're not born with this skill. Very few people are, but you can build it. And when you do, when you master those 47 seconds between impulse and action, you unlock the ability to build real, lasting wealth. Not because you're earning more, not because you're investing better, but because you're keeping more of what you earn and deploying it intentionally rather than reactively. If this conversation revealed something about your own spending patterns, if it made you uncomfortable because you recognized yourself, that's good. That discomfort is the signal that change is possible and necessary. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who earns good money but never seems to get ahead. Someone who's always buying stuff but never building wealth. Someone who needs to understand that the problem isn't their income or their investment strategy. It's the 47 seconds between wanting and buying. And join this community. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Because we're going to keep having these conversations about the behavioral foundations of wealth building that nobody else talks about. Financial education focuses on what to do with money once you have it. We focus on the behavioral discipline that allows you to accumulate money in the first place. That's the missing piece. That's what actually matters. The 72-hour rule is simple. Deceptively simple. But it's more powerful than any investment strategy, any tax optimization, any financial planning technique you'll ever encounter. Because it addresses the root cause of why most people never build wealth. Implement it, track it, stick with it even when it's uncomfortable. And watch what happens to your financial life over months and years. You have the framework now. You understand the psychology. You understand the systems. You understand why this matters more than anything else you'll do financially. Now go execute. Pause between wanting and buying. Build the discipline that creates freedom. Become someone who controls their impulses rather than being controlled by them. That's how wealth is really built. Not through complex strategies. Through simple behavioral discipline consistently applied over time. You can do this. You can change. You can become someone who has the 47-second pause that separates wealth builders from wealth spenders. Your future self is waiting. Start now.